Welcome to The Explainer. Look, we're totally bypassing the Mindfulness 101 stuff today. Instead, we're diving straight into a rigorous, cross-disciplinary breakdown of two of the absolute most profound contemplative technologies ever engineered, Theravada Buddhist Vipassana and Daoist Nèiguān. If you're an advanced meditator, a neuroscientist, or a clinical psychologist, buckle up. We're going incredibly deep into the phenomenological and physiological landscapes of these mind-body frameworks.
Here's the roadmap for our explainer today. We'll kick things off with the neurosomatic axis, then we'll deconstruct Vipassana, contrast it with the harmonization of Nèiguān, map out the biological friction between the two, and then, the best part, synthesize them into a highly advanced protocol. Let's get to it.
So, Section 1, the neurosomatic axis, and why we really need to move beyond reductionist mindfulness.
The absolute crucial takeaway here is that tossing these ancient practices into one giant bucket labeled mindfulness, which, let's be honest, modern clinical psychology does all the time, totally obscures their radically different ontological frameworks and neurophysiological targets. I mean, Vipassana and Nèiguān are both incredibly sophisticated, empirically driven methodologies, but make no mistake, they engineer the human nervous system in totally opposite ways to reach completely different end states. To do real contemplative science, we absolutely have to recognize and map these distinct profiles.
Moving to Section 2, Vipassana, somatosensory deconstruction and the mechanics of Theravada insight. Let's break down the deconstructive engine of Buddhist Vipassana, specifically looking at the tradition popularized by S.N. Goenka. Now, Vipassana literally translates to clear seeing. And unlike a lot of modern therapies that try to, reframe or manage your thoughts, Vipassana uses your attention as this relentless background radar. The whole goal is to systematically observe raw, tactile sensations called Vedana right at their physical inception. And you have to do this while holding absolute, unshakable equanimity, or upekkha. By doing this, you're literally intercepting your mind's automatic reactive formations, the sankharas, exactly where they physically manifest in the body. It's brilliant.
When you maintain the static immobility and continuously, part by part, scan the body, something wild happens to your perception. Your brain actually dials down its predictive coding over your somatosensory signals. It stops predicting the physical boundary of your form. This totally collapses the illusion that you have a solid physical body, dropping you into a target phenomenological state known as bhanga. In this state of profound dissolution, the solid boundaries of your body just dissolve into high-frequency vibrations. You experience them as empty packets of energy, which are called kalapas.
In the fMRI and electrophysiological data, it perfectly backs up this subjective experience. When we look at long-term practitioners, we see massive neuroplasticity. I'm talking increased cortical thickness in the right anterior insula and the prefrontal cortex, which are your core hubs for interoception and attention. We also see super elevated high-amplitude gamma band oscillations, right in that 25 to 42 Hz range, reflecting this intense, laser-like perceptual clarity. On top of that, there's a profound suppression of the default mode network, specifically quieting the narrative ego, and it even mitigates the cognitive attentional blink, totally optimizing how your brain allocates attention to sensory targets.
All right, Section 3, Nèiguān. We're talking reconstructive visceral harmonization and the mechanics of Daoist internal alchemy.
So, for our antithesis, let's pivot over to the Chinese Daoist tradition of Nèiguān, or inner observation. This is a massive shift from passive observation into generative, energetic cultivation. Instead of breaking down or deconstructing the physical body, the Nèiguān adept actually treats the somatic vehicle as an alchemical vessel. The practice is intensely focused on harmonizing the internal organs, the zangfu, relying heavily on the structural alignments of Neigong, and using deep, heavily regulated techniques like reverse abdominal breathing.
What's truly fascinating here is how modern neuroscience maps the Daoist concept of Q directly onto allostasis. Think of allostasis as your body's proactive prediction of its survival needs, maintaining brain-body homeostasis before symptoms even show up. Through Nèiguān, or internal alchemy, the practitioner is actively transmuting this vital energy. You're raising Jing, the generative essence, up the spine to become Q, or vitality, and then actively refining that Qi into Shen, which is spiritual consciousness. It is a completely generative cycle.
When we peek under the hood at the neurobiology of Nèiguān, especially during advanced apathetic states like Zhuang or sitting in oblivion, we see a marked upregulation of the salience network.
The anterior insular cortex basically takes the wheel, allowing these unmediated, ultra-high precision interoceptive signals to rise right up through the cognitive hierarchy. Because the ego's top-down narrative priors are totally relaxed, you get this profound sensory defiltering. The practitioner experiences greatly enhanced vagal coherence and a remarkable integration of the brain-heart axis.
Moving to Section 4, Core Neurobiological Divergences. Let's map out the phenomenological friction here.
So what happens when we smash these two technologies together? We reveal some serious neurobiological friction. Just look at the operational parameters. Vipassana is targeting raw tactile sensations, mostly at the skin or shallow somatic depths. Nèiguān, it goes deep, targeting visceral organs and the dantian. Vipassana's directive is strictly analytical and passive. You just observe, breathing naturally without trying to control it. But Nèiguān is intentionally generative and synthetic, requiring very specific, heavily regulated abdominal respiration. It's night and day.
Ultimately, the core divergence boils down to their existential trajectories. Vipassana is relentlessly deconstructive. It literally wants to dissolve the physical form to break your identification with it. The goal is to realize anatta, or non-self. If you try to manipulate a sensation, that's seen as craving or aversion. Nèiguān, on the flip side, is highly reconstructive. It embraces the physical body as the sacred cosmic replica. You are actively refining and circulating vital substances to achieve extreme vitality, longevity, and ultimate oneness with the Tao.
Part 5. Convergences in the brain-body. The shared therapeutic parameters.
Now, despite these massive foundational differences in their goals, both systems share structural parameters that drive profound physiological homeostasis. The data paints a very clear picture. In relaxed, long-term practitioners of both traditions, we find shared autonomic impacts, significantly increased heart rate variability indices, drastically lower respiration rates, and this incredibly deep parasympathetic activation that restores the entire nervous system from chronic stress. Honestly, both modalities inherently recognize a truth that modern clinical psychology is really just now catching up to. Cognitive insight alone is not enough to resolve deep trauma. You can't just intellectualize your problems away. Instead, both practices utilize intense interoceptive awareness to completely bypass the narrative ego. The ground emotional and psychological states is exactly what they are, embodied somatic sensations trapped in the physical tissue, and they both consistently downregulate the default mode network to shut down that ruminative, overthinking self.
Finally, Section 6, Synergistic Contemplative Protocols. Let's talk advanced contemplative engineering.
This brings us to the synthesis. How can an advanced meditator or a clinical psychologist actually engineer these protocols together for maximum impact? Well, you combine them. We call this Protocol A, the Somato-alchemical scan. Check this out. Step 1, you start with Vipassana sweeping. You use that rigorous, objective scanning of tactile sensations to break up rigid somatic patterns and trauma loops. Step 2, once the body hits the stage of Banga, where it's literally dissolving into continuous, high-frequency vibration, you intentionally shift gears into Nèiguān mechanics. Step 3, you use the lower dantian to anchor, gather, and stabilize all that newly freed, highly activated alchemical energy. This ensures you aren't left feeling ungrounded or dissociated.
This kind of integrated approach is an absolute game changer. It allows you, the practitioner, to navigate the friction of these practices dynamically, pulling out the exact cognitive tool you need for whatever neurobiological state you're in at any given moment. Contemplative engineering, synthesizing analytical dissolution with energetic cultivation, gives us a unified, incredibly powerful framework for both deep trauma resolution and stabilizing non-dual awareness.
I want to leave you with a provocative thought. We aren't just philosophizing here anymore. We're actively mapping these ancient ontological technologies directly onto modern biophysical and neurobiological models. As this bridge between profound subjective inquiry and empirical science continues to strengthen, how is this going to fundamentally alter the future of clinical psychology, psychiatry, and human optimization? It's a huge question. Thank you so much for exploring the cutting edge of contemplative science with me today. I'll see you in the next explainer.